Welcome to the show, Huss.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me again.
Yeah, it's good to catch up again. Now, today we are taking this episode or this discussion a little bit further, just to round out where we've been on our journey of discussions. We've talked about ritualizing action in the last episode, and for if you haven't heard that one already, please go back to that session, because there's some really good advice in there on how to create your perfect plan, but then ritualizing the action. Huss, is there anything from that episode that you think of the real quick recap for anyone?
Yeah, for sure. I think off the top, great point. Go back to it. But if you don't have the time right now to do that, I think the key bit really is we're really talking about the what in that episode. So the ritualize of what are we talking about? So it's more the key productivity tool there was eliminating things that don't really align with what matter for your goals. And then starting to ritualize habits that promote holistic well-being. So we spoke about peak performance, the foundation being optimal health. And so, yeah, it's all about those ritualizing those key habits. What do they look like in your workday? What do they look like in your day-to-day? How do we ritualize them or make them the most important, the priorities? And then it really leads into today, which is the how, right? So it's all great. It's all great to know it all, but it's about, the how.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point. I think most of us always have good intentions, and perhaps we even get to that point where we are starting to learn how to ritualize our plan to improve ourselves, whether that's with our performance or whether that's our health. But I guess then going, to that next level, it's really about execution, isn't it? So executing on things that we said we would do, and really being relentless with that in our approach to our health and our performance. So just on that point of execution and how to do it daily at such a consistent level, almost like a metronome of performance and getting things done.
Yeah.
Based on our chats, you sound like you're fantastic with the discipline side of it. So what are the key components that you think are important here for people to kind of take their performance to the next level, but also just that health and well-being approach to getting the best out of themselves?
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate that. Discipline is one of my high strengths, right? So in the strength indicators there. So I'm fortunate to have that as a strength, but we all have different strengths to leverage. And so we can develop anything we want with focusing on the key elements. To answer your question, it's really about the 4 key elements in the book. 2 are skills and 2 are really perspective and mindset elements. So the 2 skills are around planning a day. So that's really about understanding you, what's key for you. And again, everyone's different. So there's no right or wrong. There's no perfect. It's what's right for you, right? And so that's based on the whole bunch of things which we've discussed to this point, and hence why it's the last part. But on a very high level, planning effectively, reviewing effectively. What's your refining and reviewing process based on your execution? I think it's actually the most important. Then the 2 other elements are around loving your fate. So not really focusing on things happening to you, but think of it as why they've happened, what the opportunity is to help you keep going, right? Because executing daily really comes from consistent behavior. And a lot of the time we can be a victim of the things around us that then become the reason why. But if we change our mindset, we can actually have a bigger mindset, growth mindset, and despite of everything, drive those actions. And the final part's around what to expect. Often reality and expectation are 2 different levels, naturally. Yeah. And so if we can really sharpen the mindset and be relentless, if I can borrow your language there, it's going to collaborate a perfect kind of environment to be more consistent.
Yeah, I love it. One of the first things you talked about there, Huss, is around just the planning. So planning your day, and there's that great saying that I probably will mess up here, but it's like plan your work your plan. Have I got that right? I think I have. So that idea of mapping things out and then just focusing on what you've said. So just to work on, or just to talk about that for a second. So the planning side of it, I'll just share what I would do. For example, on a work week, is I actually utilize, it might not be favorable for a lot of people, but I actually use Sunday, just a quick half an hour on a Sunday to plan out my week, so that then basically all the way through to about this time, which is Friday at the time of recording this, I've pretty much done everything that I had already thought about on Sunday. So there's no surprises, and I've pretty much done everything, thought it and planned it well ahead, so that there's not much room for adjustments, if that makes sense. Which means that I then have to do it, and I can't really deviate from the plan too much, and nor do I want to, because I've done all the thinking around it. What about you? What's your approach? Yeah, and I get Sundays probably an ordinary night for a lot of people, but I've just found it to be the quietest time in my week.
Yeah, no, love it. And really, there's no right or wrong. It's what works for you. And often, I'm going to assume a bit here, but if I asked you why Sunday, I'm going to assume that the state you're in on Sunday is a lot more present, and you're able to really think the ideal plan for Monday to Friday than you would if you got to the desk on Monday morning. You'd be a lot more rushed. I'm going to assume it's going to be a different kind of mindset. There are other things that are pressing. And so you've got the foresight, and that's what works for you. Sundays naturally have been my kind of review days of just holistic planning for the week and everything like that. I actually try really hard to keep my Friday arvos open and get really even a forward front on the week. And the reason why I personally do that, and again, everyone works differently, is that I like kind of planning for the next week, knowing what's to come on a Friday, while just experiencing a week and allowing myself to review what's worked and what hasn't. Because on the Friday, my Monday to Friday morning has been very fresh in my mind. So I can kind of go, or make a few notes on the key things. But either or, the days don't really matter. It's what works based on your planning. I mean, that's an ideal scenario. Some Fridays are getting busier than ideal for me, but that's just part of being resilient, right? And just getting on with it regardless. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's good to share the different approaches here. I guess one of the other aspects of the 4 components was really around mindset. I'm wondering, from your perspective and with the coaching that you do and the workshops and the education that you deliver as well, what are some of the main things that kind of get in the way for people? What are some of the areas that people need to pay a bit more attention to in today's world, do you think?
Now, mine's the big one because it gives you perspective, right? So we feel things. Like if you ask someone how you're feeling, it comes from a mindset. So the most powerful thing is 2 people can go through the same experience and have a different mood effect from it, right? And that really comes from the perspective, how we see things. And so a lot of the time when it comes to peak performance, I'm very practical in my approach and what I've learned and what I think is essential. What's the practical elements? But I think in having a mindset to support that's really important. Hence, to your question, there are 4 key parts: planning the day, reviewing the day, loving your fate, which is more that mindset, like focusing on what you can control, not what you can't. And then, of course, expectation versus reality. But to your question, I think the biggest one right now, I mean, they all are relevant. It's individual based on experience. But I think planning, really effective planning, is what stands out. I'm seeing slightly more and more. And what I mean by that is planning towards your priorities and your main chief aims. I mean, an example might be, of course, sometimes, and I feel like all of us are really busy, or we're just doing a whole bunch of stuff. But I think we can all relate to that feeling where you're really busy, the day's been flat out, but you look back and you feel like you haven't really done much. And that's often the cost of being busy, doing a whole bunch of surface level things that weren't on your priority or big goal list. And so planning effectively, eating the frog, doing the main things, doing that one thing that really matters. I think we tapped on that idea in our previous discussion. And so we're really driving action towards the things that matter, towards our goals, rather than just being reactive to the little things where we're not going and really creating or reaching those big goals. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, the planning. And I also think, Huss, in today's world, especially the way workplaces are operating from homes or remotely or a bit of everything, the planning can sometimes go out the window because there's that lots of interruptions coming at us with meetings and stuff that are, if it's hybrid, it's a little bit more of a longer day perhaps, or just a little bit trickier for people to, they can lose perspective because they are working from home and getting distracted in other ways. I'm wondering as well, with executing on a daily basis, I think for some people as well, sometimes that consistency of behavior and planning well and then executing all the time, the consistency sort of runs out to a point, and maybe there's a motivation drop perhaps, or that they just something happens and they sort of lose the habit. Is there any tips for people that are going well with their habit, but then that sort of drops? So is there any ways to kind of re-kick things back in, or is it all just about going back to those key principles?
Yeah, I mean, great point. I think we've all been there, absolutely. And I think the main thing with habits, of course, is that continuous behavior. So think about that trigger that promotes the habit that you want to do in your workday. It might be a specific activity. What's the trigger? What's the thing that encourages you, motivates you to do that? Physical health example would be having the shoes by the door for the run. It might be a specific reporting element you do. The trigger is actually a notification that pops you out. And making sure you do that. So the key, I would say, and what the literature says actually is, don't allow that to happen 2 days in a row, right? Then you really break a habit. So if it's one day, that is your sole focus the next day to get it done. But often if we sway a bit in regards to that effect, that real, I can hear it in the kind of the question you ask, if you sway a bit in regards to your excitement or motivation, often we really need to recenter our goal, reconnect with our goal, and align why we are doing it. So we really have meaning behind it, re-collaborate. And what you might find is a great learning, right? You've either recognized that the goal you set is maybe needs a bit of adjusting, and then your daily contribution, so what you choose to do every day to attract that goal, might need to just change a bit, right? And so really it's great. It's a great learning. Again, that's a mindset shift on the scenario. And we're always growing in a different capacity. And so it's all just really feedback just to refine our approach. And that's the whole point about executing daily. It's the reason why we do it every day is that it's about the journey. It's about who we become on the journey. And we're constantly growing. And so naturally, what we thought we wanted maybe, or what we were going for, changes. And so the journey to get there might have to slightly change in our approach as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess as well with the goal setting, like the ability to change it sort of means that there's not there is a finish line in some ways, but then it's what's next. So I also think as well within that, for some people that do fall off with their goals, perhaps it's obviously rethinking. They need to rethink and reset. But I'd also go as far to plan out. This might seem like a lot of planning for some people, but looking at the whole year. So the whole year is 52 weeks. So how are you going to break up that year to ensure that you actually, you execute when you want to, but you make sure that you have some breaks in there so that you're fresh all the time. So you're not actually taking yourself executing all the time, burning out, and then you have to restart again, like some people do through winter where they stop exercising. What about just planning 10-week blocks of, I'm actually going to perform well for 10 weeks. Then I'm going to have a break. Then I'm going to go another 10 weeks. It's something that I've kind of been looking at a fair bit personally. And I think as well, that maybe what's conveniently aligned there for me is school holidays. So the school holiday sort of blocks of, terms or whatever. It's basically forcing in some ways to have a bit of a reality check because you've, hanging out with the kids for a good couple of weeks and making sure that you're having a good break. Huss, is that something that you've seen for high performing individuals where they go, all right, I'm going to go well here for 4 weeks and then I'm going to have a break? Or is that something you've implemented in your own, career?
I love that example, that cyclical example. And really, there's many different journeys to that goal, right? And so the short answer is yes, absolutely. It's what works for you, your personality. What I'm hearing there as well is that you've got these two priorities: family, time with the kids, and your health, right? There's always a compromise if we put more time and effort in one bucket because we only have 24 hours in a day. So what you've done there is justified a method that allows you to keep reaching your health goals. And what very cleverly as well, recognize that if you don't have those breaks, you might burn out. So that's self-awareness. And so absolutely, because you're still getting to where you want to go, just on your own journey. And so you've really illuminated the importance of you got to do what works for you, right? And so my personality type is I love each day being routinized in a way that's very similar rather than being cyclical. And so if I was, for example, writing a book, I'd write a bit every day rather than having 2 writing days a week. That works for me. Right.
I wish I could do that.
But the point is, you've written your book. You've written a book, and I have by the due date, just in our own approach, and we've peak performed along the way. You haven't suffered in applying a process that doesn't work for your personality type. So, absolutely, heaps of couple of high level executives I work with apply that approach to different values, and the key there you illuminated was you can foresee a time where you want to be spending more time in a certain bucket, your family, your children, and so how do I work more training around that, get that hour back to spend more time? It works, right? And clearly you found that it works. And the only other point I'd add to that is if you're unsure, find the measuring tool to measure how effective it is. Track your mood every day, track how you're feeling, and then you'll adjust from there. But yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Yeah, that's really good about, I guess, just ensuring going back to measurement. Otherwise, you don't know really what's working and what's not. One other thought, just within all of this and the executing daily, clearly in workplaces, if we go back to the work, like how people are working,
Absolutely.
and managers are trying to work with their teams, it's a pretty tricky time. It's hard to execute daily as a team, and also from a manager perspective, it's kind of hard to understand how everyone's going and how everyone is going, especially around performance. What areas do you think of this execution part, and making sure that people are planning their days and their mindset is as sharp as it can be? Where do you think in a workplace environment that could, some of these skills could be useful, and also the role of the manager here? How can they kind of assist?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. I think it's a good example. I worked with a team last week around this. And the key bit is every element's important. I think managers, especially in our new way of working, have almost got more responsibility and have really been asked to have more varied skills in management. Because if you think of management in a more traditional sense, micromanagement, that's gone out, right? So we've got to be more authentic. We've got to trust. We've got to support with the right resources. And this is the way to inspire an individual to help them be their best in their work, right? Because in an ideal climate, and let's build that fundamental base, each individual understands what tasks are ahead for the day, how they contribute to the greater goal, right? And so to answer your question specifically, what I find to be the most important one is that review process. How are we reviewing efforts? What type of questions? How are we actually reviewing the measurement? Those key actions which are going to attract the outcomes. What went well? What could go better? What are we going to change next time? Because when we do that more often than not on a consistent basis, we're refining our team's application to the skill, which is going to help attract the outcome, right? So that really hangs out. This discussion, a lot of these ideas is around how we do it, depending on the role, the nature of the business, the personality type of the individual. The manager really has a responsibility to understand what works best. And that's why the how is really important, right? And that's why we've got to really respect individuals, respect the way each individual likes to be kind of managed and nurtured through the process. We've got so many tools now. And so, yeah, but I think the review process is the key indicator that I see again and again, that if it's done correctly, it really drives performance. Most, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And also, I guess, what I've seen and heard, and probably, to be honest, in the last couple of years within our business, we've had to change our practices of just how we lead and manage, and in some parts, and we haven't been as consistent as we've needed to be, from in terms of that leadership, one-on-one discussions, and really by getting that done consistently, things can change and things can improve. And there are various tools out there, but one of the great tools that I've found useful is when talking about roles is simply a simple scorecard of three key outcomes that are measurable, as in they're the results and outcomes that we want. Included in that, though, is not just for example, a budgetary type requirement, but also being rewarded for effort as well. But if you fail to talk about that and repeat and refer to that often, it's very hard, and it gets a bit murky with expectations as well. But it's a great chance to get feedback as to how the individual's going. So, yeah, it's a really good point, Huss. I mean, leadership has changed so much, and management especially in the last couple of years. So it's a pretty interesting time. We're also seeing a lot more tools being used that are data based, as in getting data on how people are feeling, and that feedback loop going back to the leader or the manager to then make decisions based on a bit more objective, because otherwise it can be too subjective with every individual. So a bit of both is really what's needed.
Yeah, and I love your point around, for example, like a sales role, very target driven, very specific in regard to the outcome, but refining that and helping the individual understand which daily practices or activities or things that can be converted into effort can attract that goal. And so you've got what you can control, because a lot of the time, back to that idea around what you can and can't control, you can control your effort and your activity and what you choose and where you choose to spend your energy. Does that necessarily mean you're going to hit your target? No, because it takes another individual outside of you. But we're going to focus. We're going to really help you focus on what you can control. Yeah, so great point there for sure.
Yeah, love it. Huss, thanks so much for your time today. If you think back through the last few sessions, we've covered off on quite a lot of information. It's really good it'll be really good for everyone to review all three of these. But yeah, thanks for your time today, and look forward to continuing our discussions coming up very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Until next time.
Thanks, mate.
Take care.